everyone, and welcome to the Fragrance Report. I'm your host, Anya, and today's podcast episode will focus on celebrity fragrances. Last week, I did a brief rundown on the history of celebrity endorsements with regards to fragrances, so that was pretty fun and interesting, and I was inspired to do a continuation of that and shop my stash, if you will, come up with some celebrity fragrances that I already have in my collection, chit chat about them, talk about their background. If you're new to this podcast, well, let me introduce myself. My name is Anya. I love fragrances and I love talking about them on social media. I have a YouTube channel under the username ANECHKAFRAGRANCES, and I also post on other social media platforms as well. But I started this podcast as a way to have a more in-depth conversation with you about things like fragrance history, really diving deep into themes and topics like consumerism. The general format of these episodes usually involves me talking about the fragrances I've been loving and wearing over the past week, fragrances that I've been including in my rotation, and then I dive into the topic of the episode. Today's topic will be celebrity fragrances, so I have here some fragrances from the 1980s, early 2000s, and present day. I'm excited to get into it, so let's get started. So first, let's dive into some fragrance favorites, and I usually have a small handful to share, but this time I have, I think, 8 fragrances to share with you. I've been wearing a lot of these different fragrances layered together. Some of them I've been wearing individually, and a lot of these fragrances are quite calming perfumes. They're scents that I associate with calming down, with relaxation, and that's been much needed, especially recently. First is a fragrance that I actually have in my hand right now. This is a perfume I've been wearing for several days of this past week. This is Cult of Caiore's Once Minerale. This is a beautiful, soothing fragrance that has a yuzu aldehyde in here that translates to smelling like hot steam, which is super unique and interesting and perfect for the wintertime. This perfume also features additional notes of woods and some aromatic notes as well. So it literally smells like you're in a spa. This is a very soothing and relaxing fragrance that I find very cozy and very warming at the same time. This also lasts a really long time, so I've been wearing it quite often. The next up is a fragrance that I actually started to reincorporate into my rotation after I received a comment about this fragrance on one of my older videos, and this particular one is Chanel's Coco Mademoiselle. I've had this for a really long time, and it's such a classic fruity patchouli fragrance, and it's so beautiful and so elegant. It really is such a long wearing, amazing classic perfume. I've loved this for years, and this week I started re-wearing it again for the first time in a long time. Also, another perfume that I consider an essential in my collection at this point is Pure Poison by Dior. This is so good. If I had to do a top 3 favorite designer fragrances of all time, it would most likely be inclusive of this. This is a stunning musk fragrance. It's kind of like a woodier musk, but it smells like a clean musk with white florals and some citruses at the top. But this is truly one of my favorite musk fragrances of all time. I should probably start exploring musks a little bit further, but this particular one is one of the best. I receive a lot of compliments on this. Not that that should define whether you like a fragrance or not, but this is a fragrance that has a gorgeous sillage, and this is a very noticeable perfume, and it's a very likable fragrance as well. Pure Poison by Dior. I'm pretty much halfway through my bottle. I love this. It's an essential in my collection at any given point. And then this is a fragrance that I actually have a decant of, and I was surprised about this because I spent a lot of time negging on this perfume. If you don't know, I like to publish kind of review videos where I buy a bunch of decants or samples of popular Middle Eastern fragrances, and I give you guys my unfiltered thoughts and opinions about whether I like these fragrances or not. And a lot of times I'm very hypercritical about perfumes, especially fragrances that to me smell typical. It's not like I will insult the fragrances, but I will just say, okay, this smells typical, this smells like this or that, so I don't really need it in my collection personally. But I tried this fragrance. It was right next to my desk actually, and I wanted to spray on a perfume. And I've been moving lately, so everything's in boxes at the moment, especially my decants, but this one was not in a box. So I just took this random scent and I started spraying on myself, and I was like, well, you know what? I really like this a lot. Turns out it's Lattafa's Angam perfume, a fragrance that I made fun of the bottle because the bottle looks like a band-aid was slapped on it. Look it up, it's hilarious. But the bottle literally looks so weird. But the fragrance itself is such a beautiful vanilla. And I will say I don't know if it's my imagination or not, but I feel like this is a better version of Burberry Goddess, which is what it's supposed to be inspired by, I believe. But this is like a more elevated vanilla. It's a really interesting fragrance. Let me pull up the notes because I was kind of surprised about how much I liked it. Because if you're watching the video version of this, I am two-thirds done with this decant. It's an 8 milliliter decant. I think I'm gonna have to buy the full bottle at some point, which again is surprising to me, but it just proves that you can change your mind. So this particular fragrance has top notes of ginger, mandarin, and pink pepper, a mid of lavender, praline, cacao, and jasmine, and then a base of vanilla, amber, and musk. This is a really beautiful, soothing, approachable vanilla, and I think what makes it soothing is the lavender in here. And it almost smells like a lightly iced vanilla, nothing too sweet. And I really like it. It's one of those simple fragrances that you can just spray on and not have to worry about. That's why I like it. I really have been gravitating towards it. I've been overspraying it, which is probably why I am almost done with my decant. But it just goes to show that sometimes it's nice to get a decant of certain fragrances because then you can really spray it on, get a sense of whether you like the fragrance or not, and then you can make an educated decision about whether or not you want to actually buy the full bottle. In this particular case, even though when I initially smelled the fragrance, I was very discerning about it, I feel like now I kind of want to buy it. So this next perfume is arguably one of my most worn fragrances of the week. This is such an under the radar favorite for me. It's Commodities Gin. This perfume is a fragrance that's from their Archive Remastered collection, and this collection actually happens to be exclusive to their New York storefront, and this perfume is beautiful. It features notes of juniper berry, grapefruit juice, and lime at the top, a mid of ginger leaf, freesia, and labdanum, and then a base of patchouli, smoky oak, and musk. This smells like a beautiful, luxurious gin drink with the aromatics. It's stunningly beautiful. There is so much juniper berry in here that I absolutely love it, and it's a gorgeous fragrance. I personally don't drink alcohol, but I appreciate it when I get a fragrance that smells like certain elements of a cocktail that make it just a little bit interesting. For example, this is supposed to smell like gin, right? But it smells like the aromatics that would be present in gin. It doesn't smell like straight up alcohol, which I appreciate, and I love this perfume. I've been spraying this on almost every single day of the week. And it's not necessarily like a beast mode fragrance, but it lasts a really long time on clothes and on hair. And that's what I've been wearing it as. Like I've just been spraying it on all over. It's kind of been the base for other fragrances as I mix and match and layer. But this is just one of those perfumes that I don't know what it is, but for me personally, this is a very soothing fragrance. And I've kind of needed that. So this has been my go-to fragrance. I've literally sat this on my work desk and just sprayed it on throughout the day because of how good it smells. And it's just been one of those fragrances. Like we've had a lot of snowfall here in the Northeast, and this has been the perfume that has just been my cozy fragrance. So Commodity Gin, they did gift this bottle to me, but honestly, I would have bought this straight up if I didn't even get this gifted. As soon as I smelled it, I knew this was the fragrance that I wanted to have in my collection. Another fragrance that I've been obsessed with, Gucci Memoir. This is like a standard chamomile aromatic citrusy fragrance, very herbal, very delicious. And then I have a new one. This is Me by Snif. This is a fragrance I first smelled at Scent Explore over a month ago at this point, and they did send this to me in PR. I recently started working with Snif, and I'm so glad I got the chance to smell it when I was not at Scent Explore, because to be quite honest with you, Scent Explore and almost, well, all the other fragrance conventions also, you smell so many fragrances and you get nose blind very quickly. So when it comes to fragrances that are more subtle, it's often difficult to pick up on those fragrances and really evaluate them when you're at the event, which is why I really try to get samples and decants whenever I go to these things, because then you can come away from the event and you can smell it without smelling 500 other perfumes around you, and then you can kind of get an idea as to what a particular fragrance is supposed to smell like. And in this case, whenever I was smelling this at Scent Explorer, I could not smell this fragrance. And I was very honest. I was like, look, there's so many other fragrances. I can't really pick out the individual notes. It smelled very creamy and musky at first impression. But then, and I knew I liked it, but then I tried it when I received it in PR and I was like, holy smokes, this is delicious. This fragrance contains notes of plum, peach skin, white moss, ors, and sandalwood. It's a really beautiful kind of like your skin but better scent. It's quite musky. It kind of has like this synthetic musk, but in a good way. I definitely get what they're going with the peach skin. It's not too peachy, because to be quite honest with you, so many peach fragrances, they really lean into that booziness, but I really appreciate it when brands kind of take it to a different angle and start incorporating like different elements into a peach fragrance that just don't necessarily focus on that boozy, succulent peach. So this I found to be really interesting and quite special. It really does have a gorgeous sillage when it comes to hair and clothes specifically. This is an eau de toilette, so it's supposed to be on the lighter side, so I wasn't actually expecting it to have a sillage or much of a sillage, but I was pleasantly surprised when I would spray it on different things and then step away, and I was able to smell it further away from the fragrance in the room. But yeah, I really like this fragrance. It's kind of like a clean musk, your skin but better fragrance, and it's very kind of fruity with that plum and the peach skin, and it's just a really pretty, approachable musk. I really recommend smelling this in store. I believe it's available at Ulta, but so far this is an absolute win for me, and I have worn it several times throughout the week, and I really did find this to be a soothing and relaxing fragrance that I quite enjoyed. Now I have 5 celebrity fragrances from the 1980s to present day that I already have in my collection, and I want to explore these perfumes with you, smell them, and talk about them. So I'm excited to share these with you because some of these, not gonna lie, I haven't smelled in a while. Some of them are in my regular rotation, so let's get into it. We're going to start off with an icon that I also mentioned in last week's episode. This is Elizabeth Taylor's Passion. This was originally released in 1987. The perfumer behind this fragrance is Sophia Grossman, and this is a perfume that features a lot of animalic notes, warm, spicy notes. It's a very animalic, musky, sandalwood heavy fragrance. It's vintage leaning, so it's definitely not for the faint of heart. It's one of the more unusual celebrity fragrances in this video, but it happens to be one of my favorite affordable fragrances in my collection. I do reach for this a lot, and I think if you like your musks, if you like your animalics, this is a really interesting one to try out. Elizabeth Taylor is known for popularizing the concept of a celebrity-led fragrance, and she has had many, many fragrances released, from White Diamonds to Passion, that epitomize her old Hollywood elegance, glamour, and are in many cases very loud and very kind of keeping with Elizabeth Taylor's personality, the personality that she had when she was alive. So I really do love Passion. It's one of my personal favorites. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but it's definitely a fragrance that I hold very near and dear to me. Okay, so next up we have a few 2000s fragrances. First up, we have Britney Spears' Midnight Fantasy. This was released in 2006, and this was crafted by perfumer Caroline Sabas. And this is a fruity floral featuring black cherry, plum, raspberry, orchid, iris, and freesia, and amber musk with vanilla. This perfume comes off as smelling kind of like a berry, blueberry shampoo. It's very kind of like juvenile, fun. Admittedly, I kind of regret getting this big bottle. I have the 3.4 ounce. I wish I'd gotten the smaller size. But this is kind of like one of those comforting scents. When I first got this fragrance, I remember wearing it to bed, sprayed on my bathrobe. I really enjoyed it for that, but now I don't really wear this perfume that much at all, but it's nice to have as a relic. So Britney Spears Midnight Fantasy. A few years later, in 2008, we got Jessica Simpson's Fancy. Now, if I had to compare this to Midnight Fantasy, I would definitely say that Fancy was a perfume that probably still could be released today. This was released and created by perfumer Alexis Dedier, and this is a fragrance that opens with pear, apricot, and red berries. It has a heart of caramel, almond, and gardenia, and then the base features sandalwood, vanilla, and amber. This is supposed to be one of those warm and cozy gourmands, and I do think it still could be released today. It's a playful apricot fragrance, not too heavy on the caramel whatsoever. It's more focused on that fruity apricot. It's a nice fragrance. I do think it's quite approachable. It's quite easy. It's like your girl next door type perfume, but it's probably not a fragrance I would really reach for myself personally. Let's fast forward a little bit and talk about a fragrance that was released by Kim Kardashian. Now, in my last fragrance podcast episode, I talked about Khloe Kardashian's fragrance Chloe, and I was a little bit harsh on the fact that it didn't necessarily feel as if it was coming from Chloe. It just felt like a marketing opportunity. That's my opinion. That's alleged, obviously. But Kim Kardashian's Pure Honey could also fall into that category as just being a marketable fragrance that was released because they wanted to do a celebrity fragrance. In fact, I think many of these fragrances can fall into that category. But Kim Kardashian's Pure Honey has really stood the test of time for me because it objectively is a good fragrance in my opinion. This was crafted by perfumer Claude Deer. He's a very well-known nose in the fragrance space, and this perfume was originally released in 2013. This perfume is known to be bee inspired, and the scent itself is a fragrance that focuses on honeysuckle, I believe freesia as well. It smells like a luxurious honey scented body lotion in the best way possible. There's some complexity to this. You have wildflowers, honey, the vanilla, but it's definitely not a typical celebrity scent in that sickly sweet stereotype. This is a beautiful perfume all on its own. I really do enjoy this one, and even if you're not a Kim Kardashian fan, but you like vintage leaning scents, I would recommend getting your nose on Honey or Pure Honey by Kim Kardashian. It is a really special fragrance that I quite love, and I think it's worth a try. Next up, I have a fragrance that's from modern day. This is Arabella's Salted Muse. This was a brand created by Bella Hadid. She is an internationally renowned supermodel, and she created Arabella, which is kind of a departure from traditional celebrity fragrances in the sense that not only is this a perfume that doesn't necessarily focus on Bella Hadid, but this is a perfume brand that actually focuses on perfume oils, and the general component, the general look of the packaging is quite unique in the industry. We definitely haven't seen anything that looks like this in quite a while, especially when it comes to celebrity fragrances. So this was definitely a bit of a unique kind of take on celebrity fragrances. Salted Muse specifically is my favorite fragrance out of the line, so it's the one I own, and there are currently 4 fragrances in this line. Salted Muse specifically features notes of sea salt, driftwood, and bergamot with jasmine and musk, and it's supposed to be a kind of like aromatic green fragrance with some salted nuances. I really, really love this perfume. It remains one of my favorite designer level fragrances to this day. I think it's fantastic. And if you're watching the video version of this episode, you can definitely see I have made quite a dent in this. I have used this fragrance heavily. It's halfway through. I love this perfume. I'll most likely be using this up completely and buying a new fragrance at some point. It's quite an interesting perfume. So takeaways I would like to examine after kind of going through all these fragrances is I definitely do think moving forward, we'll see celebrity fragrances still being released, but I think the more successful launches will come from celebrities that are decentering themselves away from their brands. So to elaborate on that quite a bit, I do think that moving forward, we'll see celebrities come out with brands that may or may not feature fragrances, but I do think those brands won't necessarily feature the celebrities as much as they did, for example, in the early 2000s. So if we look at, for example, Fantasy or Fancy by Jessica Simpson, those are fragrances that very heavily feature the celebrity they were associated with. But compare that to Fenty by Rihanna or Orabella by Bella Hadid. These are fragrance brands that, yes, do feature the celebrity as a face of the brand and as the background person of the brand, but they're not necessarily naming the brands after the celebrity. So, in that way, they're kind of creating a separate entity or a separate visual entity for their products, which I think is really interesting because it has the benefit of making the brand known as a celebrity brand while still maintaining a sense of independence from that celebrity. You can still enjoy that celebrity brand's product without necessarily having a personal tie or affiliation to the celebrity. And I think that's an interesting evolution and continuation of this celebrity fragrance concept. I don't think celebrity fragrances will ever really go away, but it really is interesting seeing how they're evolving in this new age of social media and the internet age. So I'm excited to see how celebrity fragrances will continue to evolve and move forward. But let me know, is there a celebrity fragrance that you particularly love or gravitate towards? Thank you so much for listening to this particular episode, and I'll see you next week. Bye. This episode's music was brought to you by Kevin McLeod over at Incompetech. This is Beauty Flow by Kevin McLeod at Incompetech.com and is licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license.